You're listening to For Film's Sake with Irving, Twitterless Joel, and Jose. Oh, right, and me, Chris. Enjoy the show. Hey, what's going on? This is For Film's Sake. You can find us on Spotify, and you can also listen to us on our YouTube at For Film's Sake 1, and also follow us on our Instagram For Film's Sake Pod. Chris here at your service. I got on my imaginary left, I got Irving,
Hello, everybody.
and on my imaginary right, I got Jose.
Hello.
We got a really good show for you. We're going to do like the Oppenheimer interrogation scene where our special guest is going to be J. Robert Oppenheimer. Who gets to be Jason Clark? Nobody? Okay.
That'll
joining
be you,
us,
Chris.
that would be me. That would be me.
Yeah.
Joining us in our humble little show from the Music City Film Critics Association, also editor-in-chief, Geek Vibes Nation, and the host of the Home Dance Film Festival podcast. Joining us is Dillon Gonzales. Dillon, what's going on? How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me on your show. I'm a fan.
It's an honor for us to have you and to have you as a fan. We wanted to invite you on our show because to give some sort of context, Dillon, he posts a thread each year of his film diary, and I noticed that our man here exceeds 1,000 movies every year since I followed him. And I'm just super curious. And this is going to count as my first question. How did you do it?
That's my question also.
I would say it's not something I personally am like proud of. I'm not like, I don't do it for boastful reasons, and it's not something I particularly recommend for everyone. It's just something that kind of happens, and especially since 2020, whenever I got locked up in my house, and just for personal reasons, my wife and I have kind of kept at that pace. Just we've stuck more to being inside and everything just for health reasons, but it is mostly something that just kind of happens from day to day. I have a schedule that I do have to get out of the house sometimes, and
right.
I live a fairly normal life by I guess normal standards. I'm not on the couch 24/7 or anything.
And you've told me off air, basically, you've told me that, you and your wife, you both have work from home jobs, which helps in the way you both live, and also it works as more of a convenience for that sort of watching dynamic.
Absolutely, yes. So I do have to get out of the house sometimes for my job, but I do work a lot from home, and so there is a lot of, unfortunately, I don't like, there is a second screen experience to some of these movies where I will,
sure,
as I'm like doing my editorial duties with Geek Vibes Nation, I will sometimes be kind of having maybe a movie on in the background, and I just kind of like glance up from my laptop and kind of do that kind of thing. It depends on, there are certain movies, not to discount certain types of movies, but whenever you've watched like 50 plus film noirs in a year, maybe there are certain ones that you're okay kind of having on in the background because it just kind of follows a similar formula some of the times. Just but it is more so just kind of my lifestyle of just being at home a lot and just me being passionate about it and just wanting to. My wife kind of jokes that I don't like to have a moment like to kind of just sit and think.
That's a good one. And I'm glad you mentioned about seeing all the different, film noir movies, because with so many movies that you watch per day, per month, per year, I'm guessing some of it will feel repetitive. How do you avoid that sort of feeling of been there, done that? I feel like you've answered my question by saying that you watch those in the background, but if you can elaborate on that.
Yeah, sure. There is maybe some semblance of burnout at times, I'll admit. And I think it's clear, I should make it clear that a lot of my viewing habits are kind of driven by my reviewing of physical media, which I think
Mm-hmm.
we'll probably get into my movie collection later. But
Mm-hmm.
a lot of what I'm viewing is stuff that I'm reviewing for the website. So I like I have a lot of that on the deck, so it's just kind of more like, okay, I know I need to review this so I can get this out, or like stuff like that, in addition to stuff that I actually like want to watch for fun or my wife wants
Right.
to watch with me. And but this is not a new dynamic. I've only been doing physical media reviews since 2020, but even before then I was always watching stuff. I think I probably watched more like television before physical media reviews. I would pretty much watch most of the scripted programs that would come out. So I've
Sure.
fallen behind on television. I've just made up for it more on movies in the last few years.
We share that distinction, you and I, because I would like to say I'm up to speed with movies, but I'm kind of behind on shows, even though I'm doing a little better. You can ask Irving here that I've done much better with shows lately, binging on, Succession, The Bear, because, they poke at me to watch. Joelle was poking at me to watch Abbott Elementary, so I'm doing a little better with that. So, um, fellas, go ahead with some of your questions.
Which experience, Dylan, turned you into a movie enthusiast?
In terms of what kind of like spurned me on to being a movie fanatic that I am, I've always loved it from kind of an earlier, like from my earliest days. I think what really got me into like fanaticism is just the collecting part of things.
Hmm.
Even just
Hmm.
like going to my local video store, and they would have like VHSs for sale that they had like were going to discontinue, and I would pick those up and just starting my DVD collection and just going from format to format. I just
Right.
watching all of those special features on some of those just really made me appreciate kind of the art.
What was the movie that did it? What was the one that pushed you over that edge?
It's hard to narrow it down to one. I think that's it kind of all is like a swirl together. If you do pressure me to name just one, I think it's probably getting like the extended editions of the Lord of the Rings trilogy and just getting into all the discs of special, like behind the scenes special features and everything that Peter Jackson was doing with the special effects. There's just so much to dig into. It's like a filmmaking kit, like in physical media form, which I think is really cool. And but there were tons of things like even movies that I watched as in like my teenage years, like the Devil's Rejects DVD, like special features. They had like a 3-hour documentary from Rob Zombie on that just
Oh,
really like kind of blew my mind of just him going from like the first like the pre-production to the finished film and just all of the nuts and bolts of that. Even a movie like that is it's just so fascinating to dig into that for me. But in terms of movies that kind of impacted how I view movies today and kind of what I like, it kind of goes into one of my favorite movies that I think a lot of people don't really like anymore, but I have a soft spot for what it meant to me at that time of my life, and that's the movie Garden State.
Okay.
Because that was kind of the movie that really it opened the door to independent cinema for me, and
Right.
it was a different kind of like it kind of had a different vibe than like your mainstream studio comedies
Right.
or dramas. It was a little bit more scrappy and a little bit more charming, and it opened up the world of like basically Sundance to me, where I had probably seen some of these movies before, but that one just really hit at a time where it connected to me. The soundtrack was stuff that I really liked. I really love Natalie Portman, so that really helped.
Right. Can't go wrong there.
Yeah, it
And
was just a really formative movie for me.
and that's a similar experience to what I had. Uh, I always name Alexander Payne's Sideways as a movie that opened the door for me in terms of independent cinema.
Mhm.
Not the big budget movies that we all used to watch, as kids. My teenage years were in the 2000s. Watching Sideways was one of those movies that felt very adult, and it has a similar effect on me. So, Irving, do you want to chime in here with something?
Of course. So I'm very curious, as a movie fan that I am, and also like I collect movies, and probably being probably being the oldest of the bunch. I've been watching movies since I was a little kid. So my question for you is like, when you're choosing to watch your movies during the day, like what influenced you, or what kind of like was it like, do you choose the movies that you watch based on maybe how you're feeling, your mood? Maybe you probably select them based on the time that you're going to have available during the day. What plays into you choosing the movies that you're going to watch during the day? Because I bet that watching Killers of the Flower Moon and then Oppenheimer will take you a big chunk of your time during the day. So I'm just, giving that exaggeration as an example, but I'm curious to know, what motivates you to watch movies during the day. What plays into that?
The most honest answer is one that most people will not relate to, which is the what I need to check off for like reviewing purposes. But whenever I don't have that consideration, it is vibes really. It I I'm always kind of striving for something that's going to impact me emotionally. Like it's like I'm always seeking this high that I rarely get, but whenever I do, it just really hits me pretty hard. And I'm always hoping for the best. And I I in terms of like length, I told Chris this previously. I am not someone who is particularly precious about like watching a movie all in one sitting. There are movies where I do want to do that, and like the movies that mean that I particularly am invested in, I probably will carve out like wait till I can carve out the amount of time needed for that. But there are certain things where if I know I have like 45 minutes before work, and I can put something on, start it, and then like after work finish it, I'm not opposed to that, just because if if I need to maximize my time the best that I can.
Hmm.
But it
Yeah, it
is
works
just
for you. It works for your day. It works for you, right?
yeah, and it
Mhm.
usually is something that I know probably will not be particularly hampered by breaking stuff up. And I know that that would probably be sacrilegious to most filmmakers to hear, but it's true. Just I know
And I
it's a culmination of every scene, but I can kind of jump in and out of these emotions for particular movies.
gotcha. That's really good. I just wanted to ask you a quick follow-up question. Recently, do you remember what has been a day that you can say like, oh my gosh, I just watched, probably I had my best day watching movies. Like I can give you an example. I went to a festival like on October here in Virginia, and I watched on the same day American Fiction. I watched Saltburn, and I watched All of Us Strangers. And I can't recall a day that I have watched three bangers of a movie that I will always remember as like probably my best day watching movies. Do you have any day that you can recall recently that you were just like, oh my gosh, every single
That's a
movie I
great
watched
one.
was
That's a great
four
question.
or five questions. Oh, five,
Uh,
4 or 5 stars.
yeah. Probably most recently is, and this won't seem like a huge day, but considering the lengths of the movies, it was a big day. But it was whenever I did like a back-to-back Killers of the Flower Moon and Poor Things. But I do have a lot of those, like particularly around Sundance times. And I remember like last year, a couple of my favorite films of the year that ended up on my top 10 were on the same day. Like I know I watched like Theater Camp and Scrapper, and
Mhm.
even though it didn't make my top 10, I think I watched Shortcomings. There was like a spate of really good indies that I really, really enjoyed and
Yes.
just really stuck with me for the rest of the year.
I recently watched Scrubber. It's a really, really good movie.
Oh yeah, it's fantastic. I champion that movie every time I can.
Yeah.
And I want to now shift a little bit before we finish this segment out. I want to shift on to the physical media aspect of it. All of us here, we're collectors. Twitterless Joel is also a collector. We're always sharing each other what we buy, what we get. But I don't think that if you combine all of our individual collections, I don't think we crack a third of your collection. Tell the people how many movies physically would you project that you own?
Okay, so individual like movies, like I think it's around 6,500, and then like another 2,000 or so TV shows. And then some of those are multi-film sets, so there's more movies, but for titles, I think it's about 6,500 movies.
Good Lord. That's the envy of the conversation here, Dylan.
I'm proud of my collection, and although I do get a lot from reviewing stuff in the past few years, I had a pretty substantial collection before then too. I think I was probably about 4,000 to 4,500 before I started reviewing. So
Right.
it's always just been my thing. I don't really spend money on other things, and I mean, besides the essentials, I don't.
Same.
So I just that's how I choose to spend my money. And I I know it sounds insane to like how much I watch or how much I buy, but I it's what I love. And then luckily I found a partner who also loves this. Like
Yeah.
people hear how many I watched last year. Like last year I watched just shy of like 1,300 movies, but my wife watched like 900 and something. So it's not like I'm completely alone in my insanity.
Right, right. No, and hey, you're preaching to the choir here, man. You don't gotta convince us that's the cool thing to do. We all do the same thing here.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm gonna put you on the spot here before we go. What was the first DVD? Let's go DVD. What's the first DVD you remember buying?
Oh boy.
You can
I
mention you maybe not the first, but mention maybe an early one that you remember. One of the first.
Yeah, back whenever I was even more into superhero films, which I've kind of cooled on in the last couple years because of superhero fatigue. It was probably like X-Men was a big one. I feel like it was probably some kind of like Adam Sandler comedy, maybe.
Right.
It was just kind of one of those things that it just fell into your lap, and maybe it was good, maybe it wasn't, but uh just at that, especially when I was collecting so young, who knows what I was picking up. I just was collecting everything. But I think I remember X-Men and like the Final Destination films being like in my mind just like really cool. So,
I was telling the guys, my first, I merely own just north of 300 Blu-rays. I was telling the guys that the first one I bought was The Dark Knight Rises when it came out, and that's when the whole collection started. Uh, for the effect of this conversation, guys, what about you, Jose? What was the first one you remember buying?
The first one, a Christmas gift, and that was Terminator Salvation, the
Okay,
director's cut. Yeah,
okay.
and Cloudy with
Terminator
a Chance of
Salvation.
Meatballs. Those were my first Blu-ray discs.
Irving, good lord, don't tell me about your first VHS, please.
I've never got VHS, so we're not gonna go there. I started collecting movies when I think when the DVDs started to come out, probably around 1998 slash 1999, I guess, when that's the popularity of DVDs. Were like super red hot. And my first movie, I'm debating between two two ones because I think that I don't remember very well, but I know that I was in love with this movie and I was in love with Braveheart, and I think that was the first one that I bought with also a DVD player. But the other one that I'm thinking, I probably think that it was Mission Impossible 2. So action junkie here. So I think that those were the two ones, and then we started getting the the better ones.
See, I mean, we all remember the first one. We all do remember that first one.
that did jog my memory of just with VHS. I just have to say I do have
Go
a
ahead.
clear, because I don't want any VHS slander in front of me, because I guess I am one of the older ones on this chat, but I have a clear memory of getting like Men in Black gifted to me for Christmas when I was younger, and I was
There you
so
go.
excited. So that's my answer, I guess.
There you go. No, that wasn't VHS slander. That was Irving being the oldest of the group slander, more like.
Well, I
uh,
mean, I did not. I did honestly. I would have been very proud to say, "Hey, I got this VHS like a while ago," but I never got. I think
right, right.
I rented a lot of movies. I went to Blockbuster, and we can go. We don't want to go to rabbit
Oh,
hole here,
that
but yeah.
would be a separate podcast episode. Uh, so we've enjoyed this conversation so far, but before we continue, let's take a bit of a break here. You're listening to For Film's Sake with Dillon Gonzales. And we're back. So we're here joined by our special guest, Dillon Gonzales. I'm Chris, Irving, and Jose with me. We've been talking about movie collections and very substantial watch dynamics here. So I want to now switch over to Dillon. Some of your influences, like what your favorite technical aspects of film. What do you like? Do you like writing, cinematography? What's your favorite part of when you watch a movie?
I'm probably story first. I'm always looking for something that will kind of, like I said, move me or just make me think about something in a different way. Uh, Especially with kind of the times we've been living in for the past, it seems, decade now. I'm always looking for something kind of like comforting, or that just like one of my favorite films of last year was like Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. And that's just such a like a great story, and
Hmm.
it's heartfelt, but it's dramatic in the right way, and it kind of gave me the feeling of like one of my other favorite films of the 2010s, which was Eighth Grade, which I love coming of age films, and just I want to feel something, and I do, like, I of course respect the craft of like cinematography and sound work and
Right.
everything. It all comes together like how it's supposed to, but if it's a good story, I can kind of forgive, especially if it's a baby filmmaker like what that I'm discovering at a festival, that I'm like, they know what they're wanting to do, but maybe they can't with the budget they have or the
Sure.
experience they have. If they know how to tell a good story, that can kind of compensate for a lot for me.
Here in this room, everybody's a fan of Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. And you're definitely preaching to the choir with me with Eighth Grade, which is a movie that I adore with all my heart. So,
Absolutely.
I assume you have watched some hidden gems through the years. What three films you would recommend that more people should watch?
Yeah, there's a movie that I want to mention, but literally no one can watch it because HBO Max bought it and they have not released it. And then they now have committed to not releasing films on HBO Max, so I have no idea what's going to happen to it. It's called Am I Okay with Dakota Johnson. But if
okay.
that ever comes out, people should see
Okay.
it. It played at Sundance last year. But in terms of what people can see, but maybe have not seen, there is a Nick Offerman movie with Kiersey Clemons called Hearts Beat Loud, which I think is a very special film. And it's like a father-daughter music-driven like dramedy, and it's really great and heartfelt. And I really love that.
Mm.
Also, from that same Sundance Film Festival where I discovered that, there's a really cool movie called, it's another heartfelt movie. It's a common theme for me.
Yes.
Called Puzzle, about competitive puzzling. It's a remake, I think of like an Iranian movie, but it it's a really good like not like a journey of self-discovery for a woman who's kind of beaten down by like life and kind of her family responsibilities, who gets into competitive puzzling, kind of finds herself, and I really like that. And I don't know. I'm trying to think. There's a movie. I my mind is just stuck all on Sundance movies. But there's a pretty cool movie with Oscar nominee Andrea Riseborough called Nancy. Which I don't.
I've seen that. I've seen that.
Okay.
Terrific.
Which is a pretty cool like psychological drama, and that I think it's a pretty cool watch that probably a lot of people haven't seen. It's a really low key movie, but it's pretty cool.
Those are movies that I will put on my watch list right now.
Very good. We'll all be taking note of that. So you've been mentioning, the participation in Sundance, and you have in the past, and of course you are part of the Music City Film Critics Association. How have you been able to enjoy the experience of having that sort of access and, quite frankly, a pretty good voice in your own physical community?
Yeah, it's something that I really am so grateful that I've had the chance to do. It was really weird, my journey to this, because whenever I was growing up, this might sound silly to some, but I never really thought about film festivals as something that people could actually do. It was more so just a concept of just like, yeah, there's film festivals, but I cannot go to that. That is not for me. But my wife kind of broke that open for me by gifting me a Sundance trip for my birthday back in like 2018. And I was just like, oh, that's something we can do. And I went there, and it was like one of the most mind-blowing experiences I've ever had. And ever since then, that really, I was already into film, but going to a film festival and just kind of realizing what that actually means really made me like double down on independent filmmaking and getting into cinema. And so we went again in 2020, and since COVID, we haven't been able to go back, but we've been able to do it virtually a couple times, and it's so great. And anyone who can attend a film festival, and what's great about Sundance, and I'm not sure, this probably won't be released while the festival is still going on, but anyone who has a festival that has a virtual component like Sundance, like there is an option for certain movies to be viewed. Like there's cost about like $25 for a virtual ticket, I think, for Sundance. But if you can find something that maybe you're hearing good buzz on, I recommend, at least maybe if you can afford it, to try to check out a few of them, just because some of these filmmakers are going to be maybe filmmakers that you're going to be hearing about in a couple of years while they're still developing, or that maybe you'll catch a film that will not really get a huge distribution deal, and maybe this might be one of the only places you can see it. And film festivals are such a great space, and I if you can go to it in person, go for it. But if there's any way you can maybe participate virtually, if that's just not an option for you, that's always something I advocate for. And with my Music City Film Critics accreditation, and just being the editorial director for Geek Vibes, I come from a position of privilege. I kind of carved this space out for me from being a film fan and just kind of approaching the website and just kind of nudging my way in like a respectful way into this space, and kind of like carving out what I wanted out of that. And I understand that that's not something that most people can do. It was a right place, right time for me. But I do really appreciate the chance to get access to a bunch of movies that I know like the average person cannot. But it is such a supporting like these independent titles, and just like me being immersed in this world and knowing about these titles, I want to do my part with this access to get these titles out to a larger audience, which is why I love writing about film, is because if I can do anything to shine a light on something that I'm very passionate about, I think that's really important to me. It's always what I've been interested in. So that's why I write about film. I just want to make sure that these hidden gems that you were just asking about, which I was blanking on for the most part, I want to make sure that they're not hidden forever. I want to make sure that I am a champion for these underserved filmmakers who do not get the big like $17 million buy out of Sundance. I want the small films to have a chance. So that's I come from a place of privilege, but I want to make sure I do something with it.
That's well said. I haven't had the chance to attend any sort of film festival. Irving has, and we're always.
I also have, and I will see two films this week from Sundance Film Festival virtually.
Oh, that's awesome.
Well, I mean, to co-sign that with Jose Omar, because we've been messaging this past weekend. I have tickets for 3 films, and 2 of them I have heard a little bit of a buzz around it, and there's one that it's a completely blind one that I don't have any clue, have heard nothing about it, just read the description, and I was like, you know what, this is probably up my alley, so let me just try to watch it. So yeah, I think it's pretty cool, and I'm glad that you make that recommendation, Dylan, because I also recommended. I did it last year. I think we did it last year, right, Jose Omar? We were able to watch a couple of films, and I think or a film, and I think that I have been also in person, like in a festival for. I think like last year was my 4th year in a row, and I recommend it to everybody. I recommend it for many reasons, but for me, it's also like connecting with others as a cinephile. I think you cannot get better than that, and I believe that I've been lucky enough to be in the same room with filmmakers, but also like last year was 2 years ago was Brendan Fraser, and just being around the environment of a release of a movie in a festival, whether it's a small one or probably one that has a lot of buzz, I think it's pretty cool. It's pretty exciting, and I hope that anybody who is a cinephile, I'm hoping that they have the same chance that we have had, because it's super cool.
I'm itching to go to one someday. We'll see how that eventually works out. Uh, so, Dylan, before we kind of let you go here, you've been kind enough to be in our podcast. Plug a little bit your podcast. It's called if I say it wrong, please correct me. It's called the Home Dance Film Festival Podcast.
That is correct. Yes. So my aforementioned wife and I, Jessica, we haven't been the most consistent in the last year, as I know we've talked about with this podcast previously. But what we do is every episode we try to talk about 2 movies that played at Sundance and one non-Sundance film, and then just a few other fun things along the way, because we are both, like, as has been made clear from me talking, are huge Sundance Film Festival fans. So that is something that we try to do as often as we can. And additionally, if you are physical media fans, I also co-host a YouTube show called The Video Attic on the Geek Vibes Nation YouTube channel with my colleague Michael Vaughn. And every week, that one's more consistent. Every week we get together to talk about a handful of titles that are coming out on physical media, and just kind of going over that. It's a chat show between the both of us, and other than that, it's just tuning into like geekvibesnation.com, where I just oversee everything that I can and churn out reviews and all that stuff. So those are my plugs.
That's terrific. You don't gotta be so shameful about the consistency or lack thereof of your podcast. You're literally guesting here on a podcast that went on a 2-year hiatus.
I respect it. Sometimes it happens.
It happens. But we get together and it's like we're not missing a beat.
Last movie that you watched, Dylan?
It was actually a Sundance title, just a little bit before recording. It's called Reinas, Reinas. It is a Peruvian film that I actually really liked. It's about a family where an absentee father kind of comes in and kind of shakes up this family dynamic right when they're on the precipice of immigrating to America, and he kind of has to sign off before his family can immigrate to America. And that kind of, it's all in the midst of this political upheaval in the 90s. It's a pretty solid film. I quite enjoyed it. But yeah, I think that's my last film I completed.
Well, it's the last one before you guessed it here, but it's certainly not the last one for the year.
Absolutely not.
That will change. That will change pretty soon. Hey, Dylan,
yes.
Great to talk with you. Glad that you were able to take some of your valuable time to be with us. And as you know, the doors for our podcast are certainly open for you whenever you want to talk movies with a couple of rapscallions.
I would love to return. Thank you so much for inviting me.
We got to go. So for Irvin, José, and I thank our special guest, Dillon Gonzales, once again. You were just listening to For Film's Sake. I am Chris, and we are out.